In the summer of 1893, lightning struck a sugar estate on the west bank of the Mississippi River. The house had stood for more than 60 years. White columns, deep galleries, imported mirrors. A ballroom built to convince visitors that wealth could make anything beautiful. By midnight, the roof was gone. Firefighters from the nearest town were pulling apart the third-floor wreckage when the center of the mansion gave way. Beams crashed through 2 stories and disappeared into what should have been solid ground. Then the smoke shifted, and beneath the house, where no cellar appeared on any plan, they saw a brick staircase descending into darkness. The men expected wine racks. They found doors, not 1 room, not 2. A buried corridor ran under the main house and continued toward the old infirmary yard. The arches were built with the same care as a church crypt. Air shafts rose through the walls and opened behind decorative grills on the galleries above. Iron hooks had been fixed into the masonry. Narrow cells lined both sides of the passage. At the far end stood a locked chamber. When they forced it open, the first thing they saw was a row of tables. The second was a cabinet of medical instruments. The third was a wall covered with names. Some had been scratched into plaster. Some had been written in charcoal. A few were followed by dates, the sex of a child, and a single word: sold. No official report from that fire survives in a form that proves every detail of what local families later described. The estate in this story is a dramatized composite. Its owner, its physician, and the women whose lives we will follow are not presented as verified individuals. But the system surrounding them was real. Under American slavery, a child inherited the legal status of the mother. Enslaved women could be forced into sexual relationships, denied control over pregnancy, separated from their children, and valued not only for labor already performed, but for children an enslaver expected them to bear. After the United States ended legal transatlantic importation in 1808, the domestic trade expanded, and the bodies of enslaved women became even more tightly bound to the economics of human property. What follows is not an archive pretending to be complete. It is a reconstruction of what that economy did to human lives, and it begins with a girl named Miriam. Belle Reeve stood in St. James Parish, Louisiana, where the river curved between fields of cane so dense that from the upper gallery they looked like a green wall. The estate had been founded by Laurent Delon, a refugee from Saint-Domingue, who arrived in Louisiana with 2 trunks, a talent for credit, and an absolute belief that other people could be converted into wealth. By 1827, Belle Reeve covered thousands of acres. Its mill ran through the night during grinding season. Its sugar went downriver to New Orleans. Its debt was hidden behind polished mahogany, silver service, and the quiet labor of more than 200 enslaved people. When Laurent died, the plantation passed to his only surviving child, Celeste. She was 34, unmarried, fluent in French and English, and better educated than most men who tried to advise her. She read agricultural journals, medical lectures, shipping reports, and price circulars from New Orleans. Her neighbors called her disciplined. Her factor called her unusually exact. Her priest called her charitable because she paid for candles at the parish church. The people she owned used a different word: cold. Celeste did not rage. She did not need to. She kept ledgers. She knew how many pounds of sugar each field produced, how much salt pork each quarter consumed, how many hours a sick worker could be absent before the season's profit began to narrow. She calculated injury, hunger, childhood, age, and death in the same hand, and sometime after her father's death, she began making another calculation. The federal ban on legal overseas importation had not ended slavery. It had made enslaved people already inside the United States more valuable. Traders moved tens of thousands south and west through the domestic market. Families were broken in Virginia, Maryland, Kentucky, and the Carolinas, then sold into the cotton and sugar regions. Celeste hated paying traders. She hated uncertainty even more. A purchased worker might be sick. He might have been described falsely. A young woman advertised as healthy might arrive carrying injuries the seller had concealed. Prices changed with harvests, credit, politics, and demand. Celeste wanted a labor force that could be counted years before it entered the fields. She wanted births entered beside future value. She wanted reproduction managed with the same control she applied to Cain. In 1829, she ordered the construction of what she called a convalescent wing beneath the rear of the house. The architect was told that Louisiana heat spoiled medicine and threatened the health of pregnant workers. The masons built thick walls, cross-ventilation shafts, drains, and an examination room. Carpenters made narrow beds and doors with viewing panels. A second staircase connected the corridor to a service passage behind the library. No single worker saw the whole plan. One crew laid brick, another installed cabinets, a third built the hidden stair. Enslaved laborers hauled stone at night and were returned to distant quarters before dawn. 14 months later, the rooms were ready. Celeste hired a physician named Dr. Lucien Vautrin. He was not famous. That made him useful. He had studied medicine in New Orleans, spent time in Paris, and returned with debts larger than his practice. He understood that the bodies of enslaved people offered white physicians access without consent, complaint, or legal consequence. He also understood that Celeste paid on time. Their arrangement was described as medical supervision. The women would experience it as captivity. Miriam was 16 when she was summoned to the big house. She had been born at Belle Rive. Her mother worked in the laundry. Her father had been sold after an argument with an overseer when Miriam was 6. She remembered his hands, the sound of his whistle, and the red cloth he tied around one wrist. She remembered almost nothing else. Miriam had expected to become a seamstress. She was quick with numbers, careful with cloth, and trusted by the older women who managed the sewing room. She had even begun to imagine that housework might shield her from the cane fields. That hope ended on a humid morning in May. Celeste met her in the library. There was tea on a tray. A vase of magnolia branches stood near the window. On the desk lay a clean dress, a pair of shoes, and a folded blanket. Celeste spoke gently. She said Miriam had been selected for lighter work. She said she would receive better food. She said her health would be protected. She said any children she had would be trained for valuable positions and spared the worst labor. Then Celeste moved a shelf of books and pressed a brass catch hidden in the wood. The panel opened. Behind it, stairs descended into lamplight. Miriam did not understand what was happening until the door closed above her. The corridor smelled of lime wash, oil, and something sharp from the doctor's cabinet. The air was cooler than the library, but it carried no breeze. Every sound traveled. A shoe against stone, a cough behind a door, the metal click of a latch. In the examination room, Dr. Vautrin waited beside a padded table. He asked Miriam questions as if she had choices. Had she begun menstruating? Was the cycle regular? Had she ever been ill for more than a week? Had her mother lost pregnancies? Had women in her family given birth easily? Miriam stared at Celeste. Celeste wrote down the answers. The examination that followed was not conducted for Miriam's benefit. It was performed to measure what Celeste believed her body might produce. Dr. Vautrin spoke in clinical phrases: pelvic dimensions, constitution, muscular development, likely fertility. Celeste asked about diet, intervals between pregnancies, and the age at which a first birth might be most profitable without creating excessive risk. The two of them discussed Miriam while she lay between them. Not as a girl, not as a daughter, as future inventory. When it was over, a woman named Hester led Miriam to a narrow room. Hester was 30, though she looked older. She wore a brown work dress and carried a ring of keys. Celeste trusted her because Hester had survived 5 pregnancies and learned how to keep the younger women from breaking in ways that interrupted the schedule. The cell held a bed, a wash basin, a chamber pot, and a small wooden shelf. There was no window. Miriam asked when she could return to her mother. Hester looked at her for a long time. Then she said, "Not soon." The lock turned from the outside, and Miriam heard, for the first time, the sound that would divide the rest of her life into before and after. A woman crying behind a wall. Not loudly, not for help, just enough to prove she was still there. Belle Reve did not begin with dozens of women. It began with 4. Miriam, Hester, a 20-year-old cook named Louisa, and a girl called Anne. Purchased in New Orleans after the seller described her as sound, bright, and likely. Within 2 years, there were 9. Celeste selected them according to traits she believed could be inherited or sold: strength, appearance, literacy, musical skill, domestic training, resistance to disease, and the color gradations that affected price in urban markets. She selected men the same way. Some were enslaved at Belle Reve. Others were hired temporarily from neighboring plantations. The language in Celeste's records erased the violence. She wrote matched, assigned, and introduced. The people involved had another word: forced. Refusal carried consequences. A man could be sent into the mill during grinding season, where rollers crushed cane and sometimes hands. He could be sold south of New Orleans to a plantation known for working people until their bodies failed. A woman could be separated from a child already born. Food could be reduced. Family members could be threatened. Celeste rarely used a whip inside the buried rooms. She had built something more efficient, a system in which every path away from cooperation led toward a different form of ruin. That was the first lesson Miriam learned beneath Belle Reve. The second was that survival required witnesses. Hester showed her how the women marked time: a knot tied in thread for the start of a pregnancy, 2 knots for a birth, a black knot if the child died, a cut in the bed frame when a child was sold. Names whispered at night so they would not vanish. The walls had ears. The ledgers belonged to Celeste. The law belonged to Celeste. Memory was the only record the women controlled, and so, in a place designed to convert them into numbers, they began building an account of their own. The rooms changed slowly. At first, the women ate together in a chamber near the kitchen stairs. They sewed shirts, repaired linens, and prepared infant clothes, while an older house servant watched from the doorway. Celeste called this protection. She said the women needed quiet, regular meals and freedom from the disorder of the quarters. In practice, the common room allowed surveillance. Meals arrived on schedule: saltfish, cornbread, milk when available, greens, occasionally eggs or meat. Dr. Vautrine adjusted rations according to pregnancy and recovery. The women were weighed, their monthly cycles were recorded, their sleep, appetite, swelling, bleeding, and pain were translated into neat lines of ink. The care was better than what many enslaved women received in the fields. That fact did not make it humane. A valuable horse can be brushed, fed, sheltered, and protected from injury. It is still owned. Celeste's medical attention existed because a dead woman could not produce another child. The distinction mattered. Miriam learned it during her first pregnancy. She was 17. The man assigned to her was named Isaac, a cooper from another estate. He had a wife and 2 children of his own. Celeste knew that. She considered his marriage irrelevant. Isaac apologized before he touched Miriam. That apology haunted her more than cruelty might have. He had been told that refusal would send his eldest son to a traitor. Miriam had been told that resistance would put her mother in the cane gang. Neither believed the threats were empty. They were both prisoners. The system demanded that each become evidence against the other. Afterward, Miriam did not hate Isaac. She hated the room, the lock, the ledger, the way Celeste had arranged terror until obedience looked like participation. Hester sat with her through the night. She did not say it would be all right. She said, "What they make your body do is not the same as what you choose." Miriam repeated the sentence until morning. Months later, when the child began moving, she felt two truths at once: love and dread. She loved the life inside her because it was alive, because it responded to her hand, because in a world built on ownership, the child still felt like someone no ledger could fully describe. She dreaded the birth because every day brought her closer to losing that child. The baby was a girl. Miriam named her Cora. Celeste entered a different name in the Plantation book. Female infant number 7. Maternal line Miriam. Estimated future domestic value high. Miriam held Cora for 11 months. Then a trader arrived from New Orleans. He came in a blue coat and carried a silver-headed cane. Celeste showed him children in the nursery the way another planter might show colts. He inspected teeth, limbs, skin, and eyes. He asked about the mother's skills. He asked whether any of the children had bad blood, by which he meant illness, disability, or resistance he imagined could be inherited. Cora was too young for sale, but the trader noticed her. He said her color and features might bring a premium in a few years. Celeste marked the page. Miriam saw her do it. That night, she tried to steal the ledger. She waited until Hester's steps passed, loosened the latch of the common room with a sewing needle, and moved barefoot through the corridor. She reached the examination room before Dr. Vautrin's assistant heard her. The punishment was not immediate. Celeste understood that fear deepens when allowed to ripen. For 2 days, nothing happened. On the third morning, Miriam's mother was brought below. Miriam had not seen her in more than a year. Her hair had gone gray at the temples. Cane leaves had cut thin scars across her arms. When she saw Miriam, she reached for her. The guard stopped her. Celeste stood between them. She explained that Miriam's attempt to steal property had created a debt. That debt could be paid in one of 2 ways. Miriam could accept all future examinations without resistance, or her mother could be sold before sundown. No shouting, no whip, just a choice shaped like a blade. Miriam agreed. Her mother was allowed to embrace her once. She held Cora for less than a minute. Then she was taken back above ground. Miriam did not see her again for 3 years. This was Celeste's true talent. She did not merely control bodies, she weaponized love. By 1835, the buried wing held 14 women and 8 children. A nursery had been added beyond the common room. Another passage connected the complex to a detached kitchen, so food could enter without crossing the main house. Celeste's records became more detailed. She compared the children of field workers to those of trained artisans. She tracked illnesses, ages of first menstruation, spacing between births, and sale prices. She noted which women recovered quickly and which showed signs of what Dr. Vautrin called melancholy. Melancholy meant sleeplessness. It meant refusing food. It meant staring at a wall after a child was taken. It meant waking with a scream and not knowing where you were. It meant the mind reacting normally to conditions no human mind was built to endure. Celeste considered melancholy a production problem. Hester considered it a warning. When a woman began slipping too far inward, Hester and the others used what they called the name chain. It began after Louisa's son was sold at age 4. Louisa stopped speaking. She stopped sewing. She sat with her hands in her lap and watched the door as if the child might return through it. For 2 nights, the women tried to comfort her. Nothing reached her. On the 3rd night, Hester gathered everyone in the common room after the guard fell asleep. She asked each woman to say one thing about Louisa's son. His name was Daniel. He laughed before he learned to walk. He hated mashed squash. He had a crescent-shaped scar beneath his chin. He called Hester Aunt Het. He slept with one fist closed. He could hum before he could form words. The women repeated these details in order. Then they repeated them backward. Then each woman took responsibility for one piece. Miriam kept the scar. Anne kept the fist. Hester kept the sound of his laugh. If grief erased Daniel from Louisa's daily thoughts, the group would remember for her. The ritual did not ask a mother to forget. It made memory communal, because no one woman could safely carry everything alone. From then on, every child sold from Belle Reve entered the chain. Name, mother, approximate age, buyer if known, direction of travel, a physical mark, a habit, a word the child used. Celeste kept value, the women kept personhood. Their resistance was almost invisible. That was why it survived. They switched identification strings in bundles of infant clothing, so a buyer's notes would not perfectly match Celeste's. They taught older children their mother's full names, even when overseers ordered them to use only first names. They embedded family information in songs. They repeated place names while grinding herbs in the kitchen. They memorized the faces of visitors who came to inspect children. Miriam became especially good at numbers. When Celeste brought ledgers into the common room, Miriam did not stare, she glanced. A page number, a price, a parish, a date. At night she reconstructed what she had seen by arranging beans on the floor. 3 beans meant 3 children sold to one buyer. A broken bean meant a death. A white thread meant New Orleans. A blue thread meant upriver. A red thread meant Mississippi. Hester warned her that knowledge could become another form of torture. "What will you do with all of it?" she asked. Miriam answered, "Keep it from belonging only to her." That was enough. In 1837, a new woman arrived. Her name was Ruth. She was 19, literate in French, and had been raised in a merchant's household in New Orleans. She knew how to serve at table, play simple hymns on piano, read accounts, and write a clean hand. She had been sold after the merchant died. The auction notice emphasized her education and appearance. Celeste paid more for Ruth than she had paid for any woman before. Ruth entered the buried rooms believing she understood slavery. She knew she could be sold. She knew white people could break promises without consequence. She knew refinement offered no protection. But she had not imagined a place where medicine, bookkeeping, and sexual coercion worked together as one machine. Dr. Vautrin examined her on the first afternoon. Ruth answered every question with formal courtesy. "Yes, sir." "No." "Madam." "I do not know, sir." She used manners as armor. The armor did not hold. When she returned to her cell, she sat on the floor because she could not make herself touch the bed. Miriam found her there. Ruth asked how long women stayed below. Miriam said, "As long as she finds us useful." Ruth asked whether anyone had escaped. "No." "Has anyone tried?" "Yes." "What happened?" Miriam looked toward the wall. A former prisoner named Sabine had reached the kitchen yard 2 years earlier. She ran less than a mile before dogs found her. Celeste sold Sabine, her sister, and her infant son to 3 different buyers. The women never learned where any of them went. Ruth closed her eyes. "What are we supposed to hope for?" Miriam considered the question. Then she said, "Do not hope for her to become human. Do not hope for the doctor to grow ashamed. Hope for things they cannot schedule. A guard falling asleep, a child remembering a name, a page left open, a war, a law, a door." Ruth looked at her. "That is not hope." "No," Miriam said. "It is preparation." Ruth became part of the true account. Unlike Miriam, she could write. Paper was too dangerous to keep, so she practiced on scraps and burned them. She taught the women how to shape letters with a finger and flour. She assigned symbols to surnames and marks to buyers. She showed them how a date could be hidden in a sewing pattern. 12 stitches, a gap, then 4 more. The work changed the emotional center of the rooms. They were still imprisoned. they were still violated. Children were still taken, but the women no longer experienced each loss as something that disappeared the moment Celeste closed a ledger. They had a parallel record, not complete, not safe, but alive. Celeste's program also changed. She began receiving visitors, not crowds, never anyone careless, a neighboring planter, a physician from Baton Rouge, a widow who had inherited land and debt, men who spoke of natural increase and wanted to know how Belle Rive reduced infant deaths. They toured the infirmary first. Clean linens, herbal shelves, a birthing room. Celeste showed them charts without names. She spoke about nutrition, spacing, supervision, and return. The visitors admired the order. None asked what the women wanted. At dinner, they discussed reproduction in the language of management, labor supply, capital preservation, future hands. They used polite terms because polite terms allowed them to remain polite people. Directly below the dining room, Miriam and Ruth listened to chair legs scrape across the floor. One night they heard laughter. Ruth whispered, "What could possibly be funny?" Miriam answered, "Nothing down here." By 1841, 22 women had passed through the buried complex. Some remained, some died. Some were moved to field quarters after Celeste judged them unlikely to bear more children. A few were sold as punishment, or because their bodies had been damaged beyond what Dr. Vautrin believed profitable. 36 children had been born. Celeste's books counted survival rates, cost of food, physician fees, and expected sale value. The true account counted something else: who sang to each child, which mother bled too long, who held her hand, which child was taken at dawn, which road the wagon used, which name must never be lost. That difference, between an owner's record and a human record, became the hidden war beneath Belle Rive. And for years, Celeste did not know it had begun. The first death that changed the community was not the first death in the rooms. Infants had died before. A woman named Anne had developed fever after childbirth and disappeared upstairs. Hester later learned she had been buried beyond the Plantation cemetery, outside the ground reserved for white families, and beyond even the marked graves of enslaved people. But in October of 1842, Louisa died on the examination table. She was 29 and pregnant for the 6th time. For 3 days, she had complained of pain and a heaviness in her head. Dr. Vautrin called it nerves. Celeste told her to rest. On the 4th evening, labor began early. The child was born without breathing. Then Louisa began to hemorrhage. Dr. Vautrin sent for more lamps. Towels darkened faster than the assistants could replace them. Celeste stood near the door, asking whether the bleeding could be stopped and whether the child had shown any sign of life. Louisa heard her. With the little strength she had left, she turned her face toward Celeste and said, "You never knew him." Celeste did not understand. The women did. Louisa was speaking of Daniel, the son sold years earlier. The boy whose laugh Hester remembered. The boy whose scar Miriam carried in the name chain. Louisa died before dawn. Celeste's ledger recorded maternal loss, fetal loss, age 29, future value terminated. The true account recorded her last words. That night, the women refused to work. Not openly, they simply sat in the common room and let the sewing pile remain untouched. Hester placed an empty chair in the center. One by one, they spoke. Louisa sang through her teeth when she was angry. She could shell peas faster than anyone. She once hid pepper in the overseer's coffee. She had a low, beautiful voice. She remembered every child's birthday. She never stopped asking where Daniel had gone. When the guard ordered them back to work, no one moved. For 12 seconds, maybe 15, the room held a kind of power Celeste had never designed for. Then the guard raised his stick. Miriam stood. She did not attack him. She picked up the sewing. The others followed. To someone watching, the resistance ended. It did not. That night, Ruth stitched Louisa's name into the inner seam of a christening gown Celeste had ordered for a white relative. The thread was white on white, invisible unless the seam was opened. Louisa entered a house that would never have admitted her. The women began hiding names everywhere, inside hems, under chair seats, between layers of quilts, on scraps placed behind loose bricks. Most would never be found. The act still mattered. A name hidden was a claim against erasure. Celeste replaced Louisa within a month. She purchased a 17-year-old girl named Delphine from a trader moving people south through Natchez. Delphine arrived with a paper tag tied to her wrist and bruises around both ankles. She spoke very little English. Her first language was a French Creole dialect that Hester understood. Through Hester, Delphine asked where her brother had been taken. No one knew. She asked whether the river led back to Mississippi. Miriam said yes. Delphine asked whether she could follow it. Miriam looked at the locked doors. Not yet. The phrase became dangerous. Not never. Not impossible. Not yet. Above ground, the plantation prospered. Sugar prices rose and fell, but Belle Reve remained profitable. Celeste invested in improved rollers, new kettles, and drainage work. She bought land from a neighbor who had failed. She expanded the slave quarters and built a small chapel. Visitors praised her efficiency. They saw an unmarried woman controlling a large estate in a world designed to place property in male hands. Some admired her as an exception. That admiration depended on not looking beneath the floor. Celeste used the limitations placed on white women as proof of her own courage, while using absolute power against black women, whose law offered no protection at all. She could describe herself as constrained and still be an enslaver. She could resent male authority and reproduce it underground. The contradiction did not trouble her because the hierarchy beneath her remained intact. In 1845, Dr. Vautrin's health began to fail. His hands shook. He coughed through examinations. He sometimes forgot which woman he had seen and repeated procedures already completed. Celeste hired an assistant, Dr. Henri Marchand. Marchand was 31, ambitious, and fascinated by theories that claimed human difference could be measured in bone, skin, skull, and blood. Vautrin had treated the women as reproductive property. Marchand treated them as specimens. He measured faces. He recorded scars. He compared pain responses. He took blood without explanation. He spoke of race as if prejudice became truth when written in Latin. The women feared him more than Vautrin, not because he was louder, because he was curious. Curiosity without consent could invent endless reasons to touch, cut, restrain, and observe. Marchand used the buried complex to build a private reputation. He wrote letters to other physicians about cases he could never have studied in free patients. He omitted names and described the women by age, color, and number of births. He called their captivity access. He called their suffering data. Ruth memorized his terminology. Miriam memorized the order of his cases. Hester memorized which instruments he carried and which cabinet held them. They were not planning an attack. They were preparing a record. Then Marchand turned his attention to Miriam's daughter. Cora had not been sold as a toddler. Celeste kept her because she showed quick intelligence and a light singing voice. She was raised in the nursery, then trained in the house. Miriam saw her only during supervised visits. Cora knew Miriam was her mother. The women had made sure of that. Whenever Cora entered the rooms, someone used the word. Your mother saved this ribbon. Your mother remembers your first tooth. Your mother named you Cora before the ledger gave you another name. Celeste preferred the children to think of Belle Reve as their only family. The women built another family beneath that command. Cora was 12 when a visitor from New Orleans offered to buy her. Miriam overheard the discussion through a vent. The man wanted a young attendant for his daughters. He liked Cora's manners and said her appearance would suit the household. Celeste refused the first price, accepted the second, and agreed to deliver Cora after Christmas. Miriam had 6 weeks. She tried every form of obedience she knew. She worked faster. She did not resist examinations. She asked Celeste directly and offered to accept another pregnancy if Cora remained. Celeste listened. Then she said, "You speak as though the child belongs to you." That sentence removed the last illusion Miriam had protected. She understood that Celeste did not see motherhood as a bond, only as a process. Miriam considered killing her. The idea came with surprising calm. A sewing needle through the throat, poison in tea, a lamp overturned near the curtains. She imagined the house burning and every locked door opening in the confusion. Then she imagined the retaliation. Hester hanged, Ruth sold, the children scattered. The quarters searched. Celeste's death would not end the law that made all of them property. Another relative would inherit Belle Rive. Another manager would continue the work. Miriam hated the calculation. She made it anyway. Instead of attacking Celeste, she prepared Cora to remember. During their final visit, Miriam braided 3 tiny knots into a cord and tied it beneath Cora's dress. The first knot meant Miriam. The second meant Isaac. The third meant Belle Rive. She taught Cora her grandmother's name. She told her the red cloth on Isaac's wrist had belonged to Miriam's father. She described Daniel, Louisa's son, though Cora had never met him. "Why do I need to remember all these people?" Cora asked. "Because they will tell you we are alone," Miriam said. "We are not." On December 27th, a carriage took Cora toward New Orleans. Miriam watched through a ventilation opening no wider than 2 fingers. She saw only the wheel, a flash of blue dress, dust rising behind the carriage, then nothing. For weeks, Miriam could not speak Cora's name. The other women spoke it for her. Cora loved honey. Cora sang too loudly. Cora had a chipped front tooth. Cora pretended not to be afraid of thunder. The name chain held what Miriam could not. That was not healing. It was survival. By 1848, the underground population had grown again. Celeste had incorporated younger women born at Belle Rive, arguing that plantation-born workers were more predictable than those purchased from traders. Among them was a 15-year-old named Nella. Nella was Hester's daughter. She had been born before the buried rooms were finished and raised in the main quarters. Hester had spent years bargaining for the child's safety. She cooperated as a supervisor, distributed food, kept the younger women alive, and enforced enough of Celeste's rules to remain trusted. She had believed usefulness might protect Nella. It did not. When Nella was brought below, Hester had to receive her keys from the guard. The two faced each other in the corridor. Hester's authority vanished. She was not the supervisor. She was a mother watching the system reach the one person she had sacrificed everything to save. Celeste required Hester to assist during Nella's first examination. She called it reassurance. It was punishment. Hester stood beside the cabinet while Marchand measured her daughter's body. Nella stared at the ceiling and bit the inside of her cheek until blood ran from the corner of her mouth. Hester did not cry. She waited until the door closed. Then she handed Miriam the ring of keys and walked into her cell. For 2 days she refused food. On the third, Miriam found strips torn from Hester's sheet. Hester had tied them together. The end was looped around a ceiling support. Miriam cut it down. Hester struck her. Miriam held on. "I kept them alive for her," Hester said. "I obeyed for her. I made girls walk into that room so Celeste would leave my child above. What was any of it for?" Miriam had no answer that could make the bargain fair. She said, "It was for the years Nella had before this." Not enough. No, it changed nothing. It changed 12 years. Hester looked at her with fury. Miriam did not look away. Under slavery, survival often demanded choices that could not be made cleanly. A person might enforce part of a system to protect someone from a worse part. A mother might cooperate to keep a child near. A man might accept a forced pairing to prevent his family from being sold. Later generations could ask why they did not resist more openly. The question was easy only when the consequences were imaginary. Hester survived the night. The next morning, she returned to the corridor. She gave Nella food. She taught her the name Chain, and she made one change. From that day forward, no new woman entered the examination room without hearing the truth first. Not Celeste's language, not the doctor's explanation. The truth. You are not sick. You did not agree. What happens to your body is not proof that you chose it. We will remember your name. Those 4 sentences became the women's first defense. Small, insufficient. But theirs. The darkest year at Belle Reve came in 1851. Fever moved through the parish after heavy rains. Workers in the quarters fell ill. Children developed coughs and burning skin. The buried rooms, designed to control temperature, became a trap. Dr. Marchand ordered the doors kept closed to prevent contamination from above. The illness was already inside. Within 3 weeks, 7 children and 2 women died. Celeste refused to move the survivors because she feared losing control. She ordered sulfur burned in the corridor and vinegar placed in bowls. The smoke made breathing harder. Ruth kept a list. Moses, age 2, Clara, age 5, infant boy of Delphine, not yet named, Samuel, age 4, Rose, age 1, Eli, age 6, Catherine, age 3. Nella survived. Her first child did not. Hester held the baby until Marchand ordered an assistant to take the body. She would not release it. 2 guards pulled her hands apart. Something in Hester changed permanently. For years, she had managed danger by predicting Celeste. She knew which rules could bend, which threats were real, which guard might sleep, which punishment could be redirected. The fever proved that obedience offered no bargain. Celeste would preserve the system even if preservation killed the people inside it. Hester stopped believing she could negotiate with the machine. She began planning to damage it, not with fire, not yet, with evidence. Ruth would write, Miriam would dictate, Hester would create access. The next time Celeste left the ledger cabinet unlocked, they would copy names, buyers, dates, and locations. Not everything. Enough to prove design. Enough to show that the births were not accidental consequences of slavery. They were managed. The opportunity came in February. A storm flooded the river road. Celeste remained at a neighboring estate overnight. Marchand left early. One guard was drunk. The other had gone to check the kitchen roof. Hester opened the cabinet. Ruth removed 2 ledgers. Miriam spread them on the examination table. For 40 minutes, the women stood around the records that had defined them. The pages were worse than memory. Columns of names, cycles, pairings, births, deaths, sales, projected values. Children assigned numbers before they had learned to speak. Ruth copied until her fingers cramped. She used thin paper stolen from the plantation office and wrote in the smallest hand she could manage. Miriam read aloud. Hester watched the corridor. Nella held the lamp. Then footsteps sounded above. They had time to hide only 6 pages. Ruth folded them into oilcloth and pushed them into a drain opening behind a loose brick. The ledgers returned to the cabinet. The key turned. No one spoke. The footsteps passed. 6 pages, that was all. 6 pages against decades. But for the first time, part of Celeste's own record no longer belonged to her. The women had taken evidence out of the ledger and placed it beyond her control. They did not know who would read it. They did not know whether they would live long enough to reveal it. They only knew the system had made one mistake. It had taught them exactly what proof looked like. The 6 pages remained behind the loose brick for 10 years. During that decade, Belle Reve kept producing sugar, children, and silence. Dr. Vautrin died. Marchand took full control of the medical work. Celeste added another chamber, and replaced the nursery doors with iron latches after two older children tried to reach the yard. Miriam entered her 40s. She had endured 7 pregnancies. 3 children died before age 2. Cora had been sold to New Orleans. 1 son was sent to a plantation in Terrebonne Parish. Another daughter remained at Belle Rive but lived in the quarters, and knew Miriam only through brief visits. Ruth had borne 5 children. Hester no longer carried keys. After the fever, Celeste decided she had become unreliable and replaced her with a white supervisor. The loss of authority freed Hester from pretending. She became openly difficult. She answered slowly. She stared at Marchand until he looked away. She whispered names during examinations. When guards struck her, she counted the blows aloud so the true account would include them. Nella survived 2 more births and learned to hide her anger behind stillness. The women taught every new arrival the 4 sentences. You are not sick. You did not agree. What happens to your body is not proof that you chose it. We will remember your name. Then the world above them began to break. In 1860, men at Celeste's dinner table argued about election returns, secession, and whether the federal government would threaten slavery. The women below heard fragments through vents. A new president, states leaving the Union, militia drilling in town, war. At first, war meant only absence. Young white men left the parish, an overseer enlisted. Imported medicine became harder to obtain. Coffee disappeared from the house. Salt prices rose. The mill lacked replacement parts. Then war became rumor. Union ships near the river, enslaved people fleeing plantations, Confederate patrols searching roads, men returning in torn uniforms. New Orleans fell in 1862. The news reached Belle Rive through a kitchen worker who had heard it from a boatman. He whispered it through the food passage. Blue uniforms in the city. The words moved from cell to cell. Ruth asked whether that meant freedom. Miriam said, "It means the door has another enemy." That was enough to change the air. Celeste changed too. She began presenting herself as a reluctant supporter of secession. To visiting officers, she emphasized her French background and complained about military requisitions. She hid silver, moved cash, and transferred ownership papers to a cousin. She did not close the buried rooms. If anything, she tightened control. The war threatened the value of every person she claimed to own. She wanted more records, not fewer. She ordered Marchand to complete examinations even when supplies ran low. She discussed moving selected women inland if Union troops advanced. The women understood what that meant. If Celeste evacuated them, the true account might vanish into another state. The 6 pages had to come out. Ruth and Nella retrieved the packet from behind the brick. The oilcloth was damp, but most writing remained legible. They divided the pages. 2 were sewn into Hester's mattress. 2 went beneath the lining of Miriam's dress. 1 was hidden inside the wooden base of a devotional statue in the chapel corridor. Ruth kept the last page. "If one of us gets out," she said, "one page gets out." In August 1862, a Union patrol passed within half a mile of Belle Rive. The women heard horses and shouted commands. They pressed against the vents. No one stopped. The sound faded. Hope became painful after that. Freedom had ridden close enough to hear and never turned toward the house. For months, the same thing happened in different forms. Federal authority existed in the region, but enforcement was uneven. Officers focused on movement, supply, military security, and the unstable politics of occupied Louisiana. Some protected people who reached their lines. Others avoided interfering with plantations. Many had no idea what lay beneath Belle Rive. Celeste relied on that ignorance. The mansion looked orderly. The workers visible from the road appeared clothed and fed. The buried complex had no exterior windows. A system can survive beside a law against it when no one chooses to look. The first open revolt began with Nella. She was 29 and pregnant again. Marchand ordered her onto the table. She said no. The word was quiet. He repeated the order. She said no again. The supervisor reached for her arm. Nella pulled away and stood against the wall. Hester stepped into the doorway. Then Miriam. Then Ruth. They did not attack. They filled the room. Marchand shouted for guards. Miriam said, "You can force one body at a time. You cannot make this look voluntary anymore." It was a strange accusation. Celeste had never needed the violence to look voluntary to the women, but she needed it to look controlled. A collective refusal exposed the force beneath the procedure. The guards arrived. Hester was beaten. Nella was restrained. Marchand completed the examination. The revolt failed in the immediate sense, yet something had changed. Every woman had watched 4 people say no together. The system continued, but its language no longer worked. No one accepted words like care, supervision, assignment, or protection. The women began naming each event in direct terms: confinement, threat, assault, sale, theft. Celeste could control action. She could not fully control definition. In early 1864, a Confederate requisition party came to Belle Reve for sugar, mules, and corn. One officer noticed an air shaft behind the rear gallery and asked what it served. Celeste said it ventilated storage rooms. The officer requested to see them. For 1 second, her composure cracked. Then gunfire sounded from the river road. The soldiers left before the question could be repeated. The women below heard the exchange. The hidden world was becoming harder to hide. Celeste began burning papers. She started with correspondence, letters from neighboring planters, notes from physicians, price calculations. Then older ledgers disappeared from the cabinet. Miriam smelled smoke through the vents. "She knows," Ruth said. "Knows what? That the world is changing what counts as evidence." They still had 6 pages. They had memory. They had names. But Celeste had decades of records, and she was feeding them to the fire 1 stack at a time. In March 1865, Hester died. Not from childbirth, not from fever, from injuries after another refusal. A guard struck her across the head. She remained conscious for 2 days, drifting between the buried rooms and someplace only she could see. Nella sat beside her. Hester asked whether her first grandchild's name was still in the chain. Nella recited it. Then Hester asked for Louisa. Miriam recited Louisa's last words, then Daniel. Ruth described the crescent scar. Hester smiled. "The chain held," she whispered. Those were her final words. Celeste ordered the body removed before dawn. The women spoke Hester's name until sunrise. A month later, the Confederacy collapsed. The news arrived in pieces. Richmond taken. Lee surrendered. Armed men abandoning uniforms. Enslaved workers walking off neighboring states. Union officers posting orders in towns. Celeste insisted nothing had changed until official notice reached her property. Then she insisted freedom did not cancel labor obligations. Then she insisted the people at Belle Reve owed her for food, clothing, and housing. Each claim bought her dead days. The women remained below. On May 9th, 2 federal soldiers and a civilian clerk came to register people on plantations along the river. Celeste received them on the front gallery. She said the workers at Belle Reve were confused but loyal. She said many wished to remain. She said several pregnant women were resting in a private infirmary and could not be disturbed. The clerk accepted the explanation. The soldiers began counting people in the yard. Miriam was beneath them. She could hear boots. Freedom had returned to the house and was about to leave again. Ruth took the page she had carried for years. She folded it into a narrow strip and pushed it through an air shaft. The paper caught on the grill. For one terrible moment, it hung above the gallery ceiling where no one could see it. Then a gust from the open riverside moved it. The strip slipped through and fluttered down near a soldier's boot. He picked it up. The writing was small, crowded, and partly stained. Names, dates, ages, births, sales. At the bottom, Ruth had added one sentence. 31 women are held under this house. The soldier looked at the vent, then at Celeste. He asked what lay beneath the floor. Celeste repeated the word infirmary. This time he asked for the key. The hidden panel in the library opened. The soldiers descended. They found 28 women, 3 teenage girls, 9 children, the examination room, the locks, the cabinets and walls marked with names. Some women had not been outside in years. The soldiers ordered the doors opened. No one moved at first. Freedom was another command spoken by a man with a weapon. The women had learned that commands changed language more often than they changed reality. Miriam stepped into the corridor. "Can she sell us?" she asked. "No." "Can she send us away?" "No." "Can we take our children?" The soldier hesitated. "Any children here, yes." That answer contained the limits of liberation. Children already sold were still gone. Families already broken did not reassemble when a law changed. Bodies already injured did not heal at the word free. But the doors were open. Miriam climbed the library stairs. The light struck her face so hard she covered her eyes. She stood inside the room where Celeste had offered her a clean dress 36 years earlier. The magnolia vase was gone. The desk remained. Celeste stood beside it, pale with rage. Miriam could have spoken to her. She had imagined the moment many times. An accusation, a curse, a demand for apology. Instead, Miriam walked past her. She crossed the gallery. She stepped onto grass, and for the first time since she was 16, no lock turned behind her. The release from Belle Reve was not the end of the story. It was the moment the women entered a new struggle with different doors. Federal officials took statements. The clerk copied names. A military doctor inspected the rooms and described them as an unauthorized confinement facility associated with the management of enslaved women. Celeste denied coercion. She said the women had lived below for their health. She said the locks protected medicine and children. She said the arrangements between men and women had been customary. She said births were recorded because every responsible owner kept inventories. Her defense revealed the problem. Much of what she had done had not required secrecy under slavery. The law had treated people as property. It had given enslavers control over labor, movement, family, and the children born to enslaved women. Sexual violence was rarely punished when the victim was enslaved. Family bonds had no reliable protection against sale. Celeste had made the system more organized. She had not invented its permission. No court tried her for what happened beneath Belle Reve. The war had ended. The legal category that protected her ownership had collapsed. But the new order was fragile, understaffed, and deeply compromised by white power that had not disappeared. The women received freedom. They did not receive wages for decades of labor. They did not receive the plantation land. They did not receive medical treatment designed for their recovery. They did not receive money to search the South for children sold away. They did not receive justice equal to the harm. They received names on registration papers, and the difficult right to begin from almost nothing. Ruth made the first written copy of the true account in a camp near the river. She used paper supplied by a teacher. Miriam dictated. Nella corrected dates. Other women added buyers, physical marks, and last known locations. They wrote Hester, Louisa, Daniel, Cora, Isaac, Sabine, Delphine's brother, name uncertain. Children who had lived hours. Children who had lived long enough to remember a mother. Women who had entered the rooms and never left them alive. The 6 stolen pages became a spine for memory. They did not prove every event. No document could. They proved structure. The same names appeared across cycles, births, and sales. The same buyer returned. The same physician signed entries. The same language reduced people to projected value. Celeste's ledger had to make violence look administrative. The women's account restored the human subject of every line. Miriam began searching for Cora. She placed inquiries through churches and aid offices. She sent letters to New Orleans. She described the chipped tooth, the blue dress, the three-knot cord, and the name Cora might have been forced to abandon. For 4 years, nothing came back. Then a minister wrote from Mobile. A woman named Caroline had approached him after hearing a notice read aloud. She remembered being called Cora as a child. She remembered Belle Reve. She remembered a cord tied beneath her dress. Miriam traveled east with money collected by the women. Their reunion was not simple. Cora was 32. She had survived another household, another sale in the war. She had children who knew nothing of Miriam. She had trained herself not to expect a mother because expectation had been dangerous. When they met, neither ran. They stood in a church doorway and studied each other. Miriam said, "You hated thunder." Cora touched the chipped edge of her front tooth. Then she asked, "What was my father's name?" "Isaac." "Did he know me?" "He knew you existed." "Did he want me?" Miriam answered without hesitation, "Yes." Cora began to cry, not because every wound closed, because one question did. Other searches ended differently. Nella never found the older child sold after the fever year. Ruth located one daughter in Texas through a newspaper notice, but could not afford the journey until the daughter had already moved again. Delphine found no trace of her brother. Miriam learned that her son sent to Terrebonne Parish had died before Emancipation. The women kept searching anyway. After slavery, thousands of formerly enslaved people placed notices seeking mothers, fathers, children, spouses, and siblings. They described scars, names, former enslavers, sale locations, and remembered fragments from childhood. The notices were acts of refusal against the idea that sale had permanently erased kinship. The search itself declared that family bonds had survived property law. Belle Reve changed hands in the 1870s. The buried rooms were sealed after part of the foundation collapsed. The new owners claimed they had been storage cellars. Celeste moved to New Orleans and lived with relatives until her death. Her obituary praised discipline, intelligence, and endurance through war. It did not mention Miriam. It did not mention Hester. It did not mention the iron latches. That silence was not accidental. Respectability often depends on deciding whose evidence counts. The women understood that. They continued the true account. Ruth taught her granddaughter to read it. Nella told children where the 6 pages had been hidden. Miriam repeated the 4 sentences that once greeted every new prisoner beneath the house. "You are not sick. You did not agree. What happens to your body is not proof that you chose it. We will remember your name." Over time, the story changed in family memory. Some details sharpened, others blurred. The number of rooms grew or shrank depending on the teller. Dates moved. One listener remembered a fire, another remembered a flood. Names blended with names from neighboring plantations. That is why responsible history must distinguish between documented fact, oral memory, and dramatized reconstruction. But uncertainty about one estate does not erase the structure of slavery itself. The law made the child of an enslaved mother enslaved. Enslavers profited from births. Women were sexually exploited. Families were separated through sale. Physicians used enslaved bodies without meaningful consent. Owners recorded people as property. Formerly enslaved people spent years searching for relatives after freedom. Those truths do not require a secret dungeon to become horrifying. The hidden room is not the only evidence. The bill of sale is a hidden room. The inventory that lists a woman beside livestock is a hidden room. The advertisement placed by a mother searching for a child 20 years after sale is a hidden room. The medical case that names the doctor but erases the patient is a hidden room. The family story no archive bothered to preserve is a hidden room. What makes the Belle Rive composite powerful is not the idea that one uniquely monstrous woman created an exception. It is the opposite. Celeste could organize cruelty because the surrounding law already defined black people as property. Her ledgers were extreme in method, but ordinary in premise. She did not need to believe herself evil. She needed only to believe that ownership converted control into right. That belief reached into labor, into marriage, into childbirth, into medicine, into memory. And when legal slavery ended, the consequences did not disappear with the locks. Trauma moved through families. Mothers reunited with children who did not know how to call them mother. People avoided doctors because medicine had arrived with restraint. Parents taught vigilance because the world had once made separation legal and continued to make black safety uncertain. Freedom opened the door. It did not return the stolen years. Still, the women made something the system had not intended: a record, a community, a chain of names. They transformed memory from private pain into shared evidence. They kept one another human when every institution around them insisted that humanity could be priced. Hester never saw the open door, but her name crossed it. Louisa never found Daniel, but the scar beneath his chin survived in memory. Miriam lost Cora and found her again because a child carried 3 knots beneath a dress. Ruth took 1 page from a ledger and turned it into a question no owner could permanently silence. Who was this person before the number? Who loved them? Who remembered? Who profited from their disappearance? Those questions remain, not because the past is unknowable, because power worked hard to control what could be known. The task now is not to decorate horror with invented certainty. It is to face the documented system honestly, preserve the voices that survived, and name the limits of the archive without mistaking those limits for innocence. The house at Belle Rive is a composite. The economic logic beneath it was not. The names in this reconstruction are invented. The millions of lives shaped by slavery were not. And the final truth does not depend on whether a particular staircase was found beneath a burning mansion. It depends on something harder to deny. For generations, the law gave one group of people the power to own the labor, movement, children, and futures of another. The women fought that power with the smallest tools left to them: a whispered name, a remembered scar, a hidden page, a child taught who her mother was. The owners built ledgers to make people disappear into value. The women built memory to bring them back.